May 1943, the North Atlantic. Oberleutnant Klaus Weber stands at the rail of the USS Wakefield, a converted luxury liner now serving as a troop transport. The salt spray stings his face as the ship cuts through gray swells, but he barely notices. Around him, hundreds of German prisoners of war crowd the deck, their Feldgrau uniforms faded and salt-stained. They're heading west, to America. Weber had been captured 3 weeks earlier in Tunisia, part of the Afrika Korps' final collapse. The surrender came after months of dwindling supplies, of watching Stukas grounded for lack of fuel, of eating half rations while British and American forces seemed to have unlimited everything. He'd expected a prisoner camp in North Africa, maybe England. Instead, he and 424,000 other German POWs would cross an ocean to imprisonment on American soil. The journey itself becomes the first lesson in American capacity. The Wakefield is massive, over 700 feet long, capable of carrying thousands. Weber knows German submarine production struggles to replace U-boats faster than the Allies sink them. Yet here's this single ship, one of dozens ferrying prisoners westward, built originally for peacetime luxury and converted in mere months. A young Gefreiter, a private named Johann, joins Weber at the rail. Herr Oberleutnant, the guards say we'll reach New York in 4 days. His voice carries uncertainty. What do you think they'll do with us? Weber doesn't answer immediately. He's thinking about the propaganda they'd all consumed. Minister Goebbels had painted America as weak, its people soft and divided, its military inferior. The Afrika Korps had believed it. They'd seen American units in their first battles, green troops, sometimes poorly coordinated, easy victories. But then, the materiel started arriving. Endless columns of Sherman tanks, artillery pieces by the hundreds, supply trucks that never seemed to stop coming. For every American plane shot down, 3 more appeared. The Wehrmacht fought with courage and skill, but skill couldn't multiply ammunition or resurrect destroyed equipment. I think, Weber finally says, watching the horizon, we're about to see what we've really been fighting. The ship's engines thrum beneath their feet, pushing them towards a country that had been an abstraction. In the hold below, men play cards with scraps of paper, write letters they're not sure will be delivered, and wonder what awaits. None of them know that what they're about to witness will shatter every assumption they'd held about American industrial power. The Atlantic stretches endlessly ahead, and beyond it, a revelation. May 15, 1943, New York Harbor. The fog lifts just after dawn, and Weber sees it first. The Statue of Liberty rising from the water like something from a dream. Around him, German prisoners crowd the starboard rail, silent. Some had seen Paris, Rome, the monuments of conquered Europe. But this is different. This is the enemy's homeland, and it's untouched. Mein Gott, Johann whispers. The harbor unfolds before them like a vision of impossible plenty. Dozens of ships, Liberty ships, tankers, destroyers, cruisers, fill the waterway. Weber counts automatically, a habit from his military training, then stops. There are too many. The piers stretch for miles, massive cranes swinging cargo containers with mechanical precision. Even from this distance, the scale is staggering. A guard, a young American corporal with a Brooklyn accent, notices their stunned expressions. "First time seeing a real port, boys?" He grins, not unkindly. "We built 14 of those Liberty ships in the time it took you to cross the ocean. Henry Kaiser's got the whole thing down to 42 days per ship now." Weber translates for the men around him. 42 days. The Kriegsmarine took months to build a single U-boat, and those were getting sunk faster than they could be replaced. But 14 cargo ships in 3 weeks? The mathematics are incomprehensible. The Manhattan skyline emerges through the morning haze, steel and concrete towers that dwarf anything in Berlin or Hamburg. The Empire State Building dominates the view, 102 stories of American ambition built before the war even started. Weber had seen photographs, dismissed them as propaganda exaggeration. But here it stands, real and impossibly tall, surrounded by dozens of other skyscrapers. The Wakefield moves slowly toward the military pier. On the docks, forklifts and trucks move in organized chaos. Pallets of supply stack 20 feet high. Rows of new vehicles, jeeps, trucks, half-tracks, wait for shipment overseas. Everything looks new. Everything looks abundant. A Hauptmann, a captain named Friedrich Steiner, joins Weber at the rail. "They haven't been touched," he says quietly. "No bombs, no occupation, no rationing lines." Weber nods. In Germany, cities lay in ruins from Allied bombing. Civilians queued up for hours for bread and ersatz coffee made from acorns. His own sister's letters spoke of winters without coal, of children wearing clothes sewn from curtains. Here the docks bustle with well-fed workers in clean clothes, operating equipment that looks freshly painted. The ship's engines reverse, slowing their approach. A military band waits on the pier, not for the prisoners, but for American troops also aboard, returning wounded. Even the wounded are transported with dignity, with music, with ceremony. "We were told America was weak, soft, unable to fight a real war," Johann says, still staring at the skyline. Steiner laughs, but there's no humor in it. "We were told many things." The prisoners are processed quickly, names recorded, photographs taken, Geneva Convention rights explained through interpreters. Then they're loaded onto trains. Not cattle cars like those used across occupied Europe, but actual passenger trains with cushioned seats. Weber settles into his seat as the train pulls out of the rail yard, heading southwest. The guards are present but relaxed, their rifles slung casually. One offers cigarettes, American Lucky Strikes, not the harsh tobacco the Wehrmacht had rationed. Johann takes one, inhales, and his eyes widen at the quality. The landscape begins its revelations slowly. First, the industrial corridor of New Jersey, factories whose smokestacks never seem to stop billowing, signs for companies Weber recognizes: Ford, General Electric, DuPont. But the scale is wrong. Each facility sprawls across acres, employing thousands visible even from the train. In the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland, a factory this size would be a national asset. Here they pass 3 in an hour. "Look at the roads," Steiner says, pointing through the window. "No bomb craters, no repair crews." The highways run parallel to the tracks, smooth black asphalt carrying an endless stream of automobiles. Weber counts cars instinctively, one every few seconds, all moving freely. In Germany, gasoline is reserved for military use. Civilians walk or bicycle. But here, ordinary Americans drive personal vehicles as if fuel were unlimited. The train crosses into Pennsylvania, and the industrial intensity only increases. Steel mills line the rivers, their blast furnaces glowing orange even in daylight. Bethlehem Steel's complex stretches for miles, forge shops, rolling mills, fabrication plants working in concert. A guard mentions casually that this single facility produces more steel than several European countries combined. Weber does the math in his head. He'd seen intelligence reports about American production, numbers so large that they'd been dismissed as Allied propaganda. 300,000 aircraft planned for the war, tens of thousands of tanks. The general staff had laughed. Impossible numbers from an impossible country. But through this train window, the impossible becomes concrete. They pass a rail yard where hundreds of new locomotives sit waiting for delivery. Each one represents metallurgy,
Engineering, manufacturing capacity. In Germany, every locomotive is precious, carefully maintained, irreplaceable. Here, they're produced like consumer goods. Night falls as they cross Ohio. The train doesn't slow. Through the darkness, the prisoners see the glow of foundries, the lights of factories running night shifts. America doesn't sleep. The production never stops. Johann has been quiet for hours, watching the landscape scroll past. "How do we win?" he finally asks. "Against this?" No one answers. The question hangs in the air as the train rolls westward, carrying them deeper into a country that has transformed itself into an arsenal. Weber thinks of the Tiger tanks the Wehrmacht prizes, each one a masterpiece of German engineering, requiring weeks to produce. He'd seen a photograph in a magazine the guards were reading. An American factory in Detroit, producing B-24 bombers on an assembly line, one every 63 minutes. The mathematics of the war suddenly become clear, and they're devastating. May 19th, 1943. Hearne, Texas. The train finally stops in the middle of what seems like nowhere, flat Texas prairie stretching to the horizon under a merciless sun. Camp Hearne sprawls across 700 acres, one of the largest prisoner-of-war facilities the United States will operate. Barracks buildings, arranged in precise military rows, house 4,800 German prisoners. Watchtowers stand at intervals, but they seem almost decorative compared to the camps Weber had heard about in Soviet territory. The processing begins immediately, but it's nothing like what the prisoners expected. American officers explain the Geneva Convention provisions in careful German. Work will be voluntary for enlisted men, mandatory for officers only in supervisory roles. Wages will be paid, 80 cents per day in canteen scrip. Medical care will be provided. Mail will be allowed, though censored. Religious services will be accommodated. Weber watches Johann's face cycle through confusion to disbelief. They're going to pay us? An American lieutenant colonel named Harrison oversees the orientation. He's patient, almost professorial. You are protected persons under international law. The United States is a signatory to the Geneva Convention, and we will honor it fully. He pauses. You'll find conditions here adequate. Adequate turns out to be a dramatic understatement. The barracks are wooden but solid, with real beds and mattresses. Each building has electricity, not rationed, not limited, just always available. Flush toilets and showers with hot water. Weber remembers the frozen trenches of North Africa, sleeping in holes scraped from sand, going weeks without bathing. But it's the first meal that breaks something in the men's understanding. The mess hall serves portions that would feed 2 soldiers in the Wehrmacht. Roast beef, actual beef, not horse meat or mystery substitute. Fresh bread with real butter. Potatoes, corn, green beans, coffee that tastes like coffee. Milk. And for dessert, cake with sugar icing. Men eat in silence, some with tears running down their faces. Steiner, the battle-hardened captain who'd fought across 3 continents, stares at his plate like it might disappear. I haven't seen food like this since before Poland, 4 years ago. A guard explains casually that this is standard military rations, nothing special, the same food American soldiers eat. Weber thinks of his sister's letters describing the hunger in Germany, the ration cards that buy less each month, children with swollen bellies from malnutrition, and here, in a prison camp, they're eating better than German civilians at home. The canteen opens after dinner. Prisoners can purchase items with their work scrip, cigarettes, toiletries, candy bars, newspapers, even beer on weekends. The shelves are fully stocked. Everything is available. In Germany, store shelves have been empty for years. That night, lying on his actual mattress under electric lights he can switch on or off at will, Weber listens to the men talking in the darkness. Some are angry. How dare the enemy live like this while Germans suffer? Others are confused, trying to reconcile years of propaganda with present reality. A few are simply grateful to be alive, well-fed, and safe. Johann's voice cuts through the murmurs. If this is how they treat their prisoners, how do their own people live? It's the question that will haunt every German POW in America. They have been captured by a nation so wealthy, so industrially powerful, that even its prison camps offer abundance. The contrast with their homeland becomes a wound that won't heal. June 43, cotton fields outside Hearne. The work details begin within a week. The United States faces severe labor shortages. Millions of American men serve overseas, leaving farms and factories desperate for workers. The solution? Employ German POWs. It's legal under the Geneva Convention as long as the work isn't directly military and prisoners receive compensation. Weber finds himself assigned to agricultural labor, pick cotton alongside 30 other prisoners under the supervision of 2 guards and a local farmer named Tom McKinney. McKinney is in his 60s, his sons both serving in the army. He regards the Germans with curiosity rather than hatred. The work is hard, Texas heat is brutal, and cotton picking requires stamina. But McKinney provides water breaks, a lunch that seems extravagant by German standards, and treats the prisoners like hired labor rather than enemies. At the end of the first day, he pays them their 80 cents in canteen scrip and says, "Y'all did good work. Same time tomorrow." It's not the labor that shakes Weber. It's what he sees during the truck rides to and from the fields. Rural Texas, supposedly America's backwater, has paved roads connecting every farm. McKinney owns 3 tractors, international harvesters, gleaming red and operational. In Germany, horses still pull most plows. Mechanization is a luxury reserved for the largest estates. Those tractors, Weber asks through the interpreter, are they new? No, hell no. That one's from 38, that one's from 40. They run fine. Why replace them? He gestures toward his barn. Got a Ford truck in there from 35. Still starts every morning. The casual abundance is incomprehensible. This farmer, working land in the middle of nowhere, has more mechanical equipment than a German agricultural collective. And he considers it normal, even modest. Other prisoners are assigned to different work details, and each evening they return with new stories. Johann works at a lumber mill, where electric saws cut through trees in seconds. The mill produces more timber in a day than a German operation might process in a week. Another group works at a food processing plant, canning vegetables in quantities that boggle imagination. Millions of cans, destined for military and civilian consumption. Steiner gets assigned to a railway maintenance crew. He returns from the first day visibly shaken. The Americans are building a new rail line, he tells Weber that night, for convenience. Not because the old one was damaged, there's no damage. Not because they lack capacity, trains run constantly. They're building it because the route could be 5 miles shorter. The wastefulness, the excess capacity, the casual approach to infrastructure that would be nationally significant in Germany, all point to resources so vast, they seem fictional. One prisoner, a mechanic named Otto, works at a civilian garage in town. He returns each evening with stories that sound like fantasies. American civilians bring cars in for minor repairs, a squeaky brake, a rough idle, problems that would be ignored indefinitely in Germany. The garage has every part in stock, or can order it and receive delivery within days. The owner complains about business being slow because of the war. Slow, Otto repeats to the group, shaking his head. He services 15 cars a day and calls it slow.
The labor program serves its intended purpose. It helps American agriculture and industry. But it also creates an unintended effect. Every prisoner who works outside the camp returns with evidence of American productive capacity. They see it with their own eyes, touch it with their own hands. The propaganda they'd been fed for years crumbles under the weight of direct experience. Weber watches Johann after dinner, sitting alone and writing a letter home. The boy had been so confident in German victory when they'd met in Africa. Now his hands shake as he tries to describe what he's seen. How do you explain to someone who's never left Germany that the enemy has so much? They don't even recognize it as plenty. August 1943, Camp Hearne Recreation Hall. The documentary begins with sweeping aerial shots of American cities. Weber sits among 200 other prisoners, watching the screen with skeptical eyes. The U.S. Army's Special Projects Division has initiated what they call a reorientation program, an attempt to counter Nazi ideology through education and exposure to democratic principles. The skepticism doesn't last long. The film shows Ford's River Rouge plant in Dearborn, Michigan. The camera moves through assembly lines where automobiles emerge every 60 seconds. Not military vehicles, civilian cars, produced even during wartime. The statistics scroll across the screen. 15,000 workers, 120 miles of conveyor belts, iron ore and rubber entering one end, finished vehicles exiting the other. A narrator explains in German, this single facility produces more vehicles annually than the entire German automotive industry. Weber hears murmurs of disbelief around him, but they're hollow protests. After 3 months in America, the prisoners have seen enough to know the claims aren't exaggerated. If anything, they're conservative. The documentary continues. Boeing's Seattle plant building B-17 flying fortresses. Chrysler's tank arsenal in Detroit producing Sherman tanks on assembly lines borrowed from automobile production. The Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, where Liberty ships slide into the water like clockwork. The film shows workers, many of them women, which causes stirring among the prisoners, operating heavy machinery with casual competence. Before the war, America produced 4,000 aircraft annually. In 1943, we will produce 85,000. Steiner leans toward Weber. Even if we shot down half of them, there would still be more planes than the Luftwaffe has pilots, Weber finishes quietly. But the re-education program goes beyond industrial footage. The Americans show films about democratic governance, about civil liberties, about a free press that criticizes the government without punishment. They provide access to American newspapers and magazines, uncensored, filled with articles debating policy, questioning military decisions, showing photographs of rationing lines and war protests. The prisoners find this more disturbing than the industrial might. In Germany, criticism of the government means imprisonment or worse. Here, senators openly oppose the president. Newspapers publish casualty figures the military would prefer hidden. Citizens vote, debate, disagree, and the system continues functioning.
An Army education officer named Captain Robert Miller leads discussion sessions. He's a former university professor drafted into this unusual duty. "Gentlemen," he says in careful German, "you've been told that democracy is weak, that it cannot sustain war effort. What have you observed?" The question hangs in the air. Finally, a young lieutenant named Hans speaks. "We were told America was divided, that it would collapse under pressure. But everything here works. The trains run on time, the factories never stop, people complain about the government, but they still build the weapons." Miller nods. "That's because the system doesn't depend on fear or force. It depends on voluntary participation. When people believe in what they're building, they work harder than any coercion could achieve." The re-education program includes access to camp libraries stocked with American literature, history books, and technical manuals. Weber finds himself reading about the American Civil War, fascinated by how the Union's industrial capacity, concentrated in the North, had overwhelmed the South's military skill. The parallels to the current war are impossible to ignore. Some prisoners resist the programming. Die-hard Nazis like Oberfeldwebel Krause organize opposition, threatening those who cooperate too enthusiastically with American educators. But resistance becomes harder as months pass and evidence accumulates. The guards bring newspapers showing Allied advances in Italy. Prisoners receive letters from home describing worsening conditions in Germany, cities bombed flat, food scarcer, hope dimming. Johann attends every re-education session now. He asks questions, reads voraciously, and slowly reconstructs his understanding of the world. One evening, he approaches Weber with a Life magazine. He says, "Look at this." Opening to a photo essay about American high schools. They teach every child free education through age 18, not just the elite, everyone. The photographs show classrooms with 30 students, all well-dressed and well-fed, studying mathematics and literature and science. The article mentions that 73% of American teenagers complete high school. In Germany, most children leave school at 14 to work. "An educated population builds better weapons," Johann says softly, "creates better technology, thinks of innovations we couldn't imagine." Weber studies the photographs and realizes Johann has grasped something fundamental. Germany's industrial might had depended on a relatively small educated class. America educated everyone, creating a vast pool of potential engineers, scientists, and skilled workers. The quantitative advantage multiplied the qualitative one. November 1943, Camp Hearne Barracks. The mail call brings Weber 3 letters, one from his sister Margarita in Hamburg, one from his mother in Bavaria, and one from a former comrade now fighting on the Eastern Front. He opens Margarita's first, though he dreads what it will contain. The paper is thin, nearly transparent, the quality available in Germany now. Her handwriting is cramped, conserving space. "Dearest Klaus, I hope this letter finds you well wherever you are. The censors tell us nothing, but I pray you are safe." She describes the latest bombing raid. The RAF had struck Hamburg again in October. Their apartment building survived, but the one next door collapsed, killing everyone in the cellar shelter. She's moved in with her aunt. Food rations have been cut again, a pound of bread per week now, sometimes less. No meat for months. The children in her building have distended bellies and hollow eyes.
"We burn furniture for heat," she writes. "There is no coal. Mother sent me her winter coat, but I traded it for potatoes. We do what we must." Weber sets the letter down, unable to continue for a moment. Around him, other prisoners read their own mail, faces grim. The contrast between their circumstances and those of their families creates a cognitive dissonance that's almost unbearable. Here, Weber eats 3 full meals daily. There, his sister burns furniture to stay warm. His mother's letter is briefer, more controlled. She asks no questions about his captivity. The censors would remove them anyway. Instead, she writes about the garden, about neighbors, about maintaining normalcy in circumstances that are anything but normal. Between the lines, Weber reads desperation. The vegetables from her garden are the difference between hunger and starvation. Her neighbor's son was killed at Stalingrad. Another neighbor's husband simply disappeared, arrested for something. No one knows what. The letter from the Eastern Front is the most disturbing. His friend Dieter writes in fragments, thoughts broken by exhaustion or trauma. The Russians are pushing westward. German forces retreat kilometer by kilometer. Equipment breaks down and cannot be replaced. There are never enough bullets, never enough fuel, never enough men. Dieter mentions a Tiger tank abandoned because they had no fuel to run it. Worth its weight in gold, he writes, and we left it in a field like garbage. That evening, the barracks are quieter than usual. Men sit on their bunks, holding letters, processing the growing gap between their reality and their family's suffering. Some weep openly. Others stare at walls, faces blank with guilt. Johann's letter was from his father, a factory worker in Essen. The Krupp works have been bombed repeatedly. His father still goes to work, or what remains of it, trying to repair machinery with salvaged parts. Production has fallen to a fraction of pre-war levels. We do our best, his father writes, but we are building with shadows. My father is starving, Johann says to Weber, so he can build weapons that don't work anymore. And I'm here eating beef. The survivor's guilt is nearly universal. Steiner organizes a group meeting in the mess hall that night. 50 men attend, needing to voice their anguish. An army chaplain, Father Dennis, sits in to listen. He's not there to preach, just to provide pastoral presence. How can we be here, prisoner Franz asks, living better than we did before the war while our families suffer? No one has an answer. Father Dennis finally speaks, his German heavily accented but comprehensible. You did not choose this. You fought, you were captured, and now you are protected by international law. Your guilt is natural, but it is not rational. You being hungry would not make your families less hungry. It's cold comfort, but it's true. The war will proceed regardless of whether the prisoners in Camp Hearne eat well or poorly. Their circumstances have no bearing on their family's suffering. But what the letters do accomplish is destroy any remaining illusions about German victory. The men in Camp Hearne can read between the censored lines. Germany is losing, slowly, inexorably, crushed between Soviet manpower in the east and American industrial might in the west. The letters describe a nation exhausting itself, burning its furniture and eating its seed corn, while its enemies grow stronger. Weber reads his sister's letter again before sleeping. She ends with false optimism. Surely the war will end soon, and you will come home. But he knows better now. He's seen what Germany faces. The assembly lines that never stop, the warehouses full of supplies, the casual abundance even in a prison camp. His sister writes about trading a coat for potatoes. Americans throw away more food than she sees in a month. The mathematics are inescapable. Germany cannot win. The only question is how long the suffering will continue before the inevitable end. June 6, 1944. Camp Hearne. The news arrives at breakfast. Guards are unusually animated, speaking in excited clusters. Captain Miller enters the mess hall with newspapers, still warm from printing. The headlines scream in bold type, Allies invade France, massive landings in Normandy. Weber reads the article with a growing sense of inevitability. The invasion force, described in stunning detail that would never be allowed in German press, consists of 156,000 troops landed in a single day, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft providing air support. The numbers are staggering, but after 10 months in America, they're also believable. Around him, prisoners react in different ways. The hardcore Nazis like Krauss dismiss it as propaganda, though their conviction sounds hollow. Others see it as confirmation of what they'd already concluded. A few seem almost relieved. Perhaps the end is coming, and with it, a return home. Steiner studies the newspaper's accompanying maps. He looks at the supply chains they're describing, he says to Weber. They're landing entire prefabricated harbors, floating docks, fuel pipelines. They're not just invading, they're building infrastructure as they go. The article mentions Operation Overlord's logistics. 7,000 tons of supplies landed daily, increasing to 12,000 tons within weeks. The Americans and British aren't gambling on a quick strike. They're establishing permanent presence, backed by the industrial output Weber has witnessed firsthand. Over the following weeks, more details emerge. The camp receives regular newspapers now. The Army has decided that keeping prisoners informed serves the re-education mission.
Weber and others follow the advance through France. Each article reinforces the same reality. Allied forces have unlimited ammunition, fuel, and supplies. When German counterattacks destroy American tanks, replacements arrive in days. The Wehrmacht fights brilliantly with dwindling resources. The Allies fight adequately with infinite resources. Johann points to a photograph in Life magazine, an American supply depot in England, photographed before D-Day. Mountains of crates stretch to the horizon. This is one depot, he says. They had dozens, maybe hundreds. Look at what they accumulated before they even started. The photograph shows organization that borders on obsession. Every box labeled, every item cataloged, everything ready for deployment. It's the opposite of Germany's increasingly chaotic logistics, where supplies arrive randomly and units scavenge from destroyed equipment. But it's a newsreel shown in late June that truly breaks the remaining resistance to reality. The U.S. Army brings a film projector to show combat footage from Normandy. It's not propaganda, it's raw, uncensored documentation shot by Signal Corps cameramen. The prisoners watch LST landing ships, disengorging tanks directly onto beaches. Observe roads clogged with Allied vehicles, stretching for miles. Watch ammunition dumps the size of villages. Watch continuous fighter-bomber missions providing close air support. The Luftwaffe is nowhere visible in the footage. One scene shows a temporary airfield, constructed in just 72 hours. Engineers with bulldozers and graders carved a functional runway from French farmland. Aircraft land, refuel, rearm, and take off again in continuous cycles. The efficiency is mechanical, almost unhuman. "Where are our planes?" someone asks in the darkness of the screening room. No one answers because everyone knows. The Luftwaffe is finished, destroyed by attrition against an enemy that produces aircraft faster than they can be shot down. After the screening, Captain Miller opens the floor for discussion. The usual defiance is absent. Instead, technical questions dominate. How do the Americans coordinate such massive operations? How do they maintain supply lines across an ocean? How do they train enough personnel to operate such vast quantities of equipment? Miller answers patiently, explaining the training programs, the standardized equipment that allows rapid replacement and repair, the communications networks, the organizational structures that turn individual components into cohesive military force. Warfare at this scale, Miller says, is primarily industrial and logistical. Courage matters, but production matters more. It's the lesson the prisoners have learned viscerally. They'd been brave soldiers, fighting skillfully against superior numbers. But bravery cannot defeat mathematics. The German army is a sword wearing itself dull against an enemy that is a factory. That evening, Weber finds Krauss sitting alone outside the barracks. The Oberfeldwebel has been the most vocal Nazi in the camp, organizing resistance to re-education, maintaining party discipline. But now he looks diminished, older. "You've read the news," Weber says. It's not a question. Krauss nods slowly. "My son is in France. Panzer Regiment." He's quiet for a long moment. He's facing this. Everything we've seen here.
All the production, all the equipment. He's on the receiving end of it. Weber sits beside him, and they watch the Texas stars in silence. There's nothing to say that doesn't hurt. April 1945, Camp Hearne. The newspapers arrive with images that seem apocalyptic. Berlin is surrounded. Soviet forces push from the east, American and British forces from the west. Germany, the nation that had conquered most of Europe just 3 years earlier, is being squeezed into oblivion. The photographs show cities reduced to rubble: Dresden, Hamburg, Cologne. Architectural heritage of centuries demolished in weeks. Weber reads the casualty estimates with numbing horror. Millions dead, millions more displaced, the infrastructure of an entire nation destroyed. And for what? For a war that, sitting in a Texas prisoner camp with a full belly, he now sees was unwinnable from the start. Captain Miller calls a special assembly in the recreation hall. His face is grave. "Gentlemen,
I have difficult news. He pauses, choosing words carefully. American forces have liberated concentration camps in Germany and Poland. What they found there, I need you to see this. The lights dim. The projector flickers to life. The footage comes from Signal Corps photographers accompanying the liberation of Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen. Weber watches in mounting horror as the camera documents skeletal prisoners, mass graves, gas chambers, crematorium ovens. American soldiers, hardened by combat, are shown weeping at what they've discovered. Bulldozers push mountains of corpses into burial pits. Around Weber, prisoners react viscerally. Some vomit, others sob. Many sit in stunned silence, unable to process what they're seeing. These are not battlefield casualties. This is systematic, industrial murder, conducted while they were fighting what they thought was an honorable war. "Lies!" Krause shouts, standing. "American propaganda!" But his voice lacks conviction. After 10 months of seeing American truthfulness about their own production, their own casualties, their own setbacks, why would they lie about this? Miller lets the footage continue. An American general, Eisenhower himself, is shown touring Buchenwald, his face rigid with rage. He orders every soldier in the area to witness the camps, to see what they've been fighting against. We are told the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for. Now, at least, he will know what he is fighting against. When the lights return, the room is silent. Father Dennis is present again, but even he seems at a loss for words. Miller speaks quietly. The Nazi regime committed these atrocities in your name. As German soldiers, as German citizens. You fought bravely, many of you, but you fought for this. Weber feels something break inside. He thinks of the propaganda he'd consumed, the speeches about German greatness, about Lebensraum, about racial purity. It had all sounded so reasonable, so scientific, so justified. But it led here, to mountains of corpses, to children starved to skeletons, to evil so profound that no military victory could have justified it. Johann sits with his head in his hands. My father helped build the railways. He was proud of the engineering. But where did those trains go? The question haunts the barracks for weeks. How much did they know? How much did their families know? How complicit were ordinary Germans in extraordinary crimes? The prisoners argue, debate, deny, and gradually, painfully, begin to accept. The regime they'd served had committed atrocities that would stain German identity for generations. More news arrives in rapid succession. Hitler is dead, suicide in his bunker. Admiral Dönitz attempts to form a government, but has nothing left to govern. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrenders unconditionally. The war in Europe is over. The camp receives the news without celebration. For the prisoners, victory and defeat have lost meaning. They're alive, well-fed and safe, while their homeland lies in ruins. The guilt that had plagued them since receiving letters from home intensifies into something more profound, collective shame for what was done in their nation's name. Captain Miller organizes more screenings, footage of the Nuremberg trials being prepared, documentation of Nazi crimes, testimonies from survivors. The re-education program shifts from demonstrating American strength to confronting German guilt. Some prisoners resist, clinging to denial. Others accept, sometimes too readily, blaming everything on Nazi leadership while absolving themselves. Weber finds himself in neither camp. He accepts that he fought for a regime that committed unspeakable evil. He also accepts that he personally pulled no triggers in the death camps, gassed no prisoners, operated no crematoriums. The moral complexity is unbearable, and yet it must be borne. One evening, Steiner approaches Weber with a newspaper showing photographs of German civilians being forced to tour the liberated camps. to bury the dead, to witness what was done. They're making them look, Steiner says, making everyone see. Good, Weber replies. We should all see, should remember, should never forget what happens when a nation stops thinking critically and starts following blindly. September 1945, Camp Hearne. The repatriation process begins slowly. The war is over, but Germany is devastated, divided, and barely functional. The Allies can't simply dump hundreds of thousands of prisoners back into a collapsed nation. Instead, they begin a measured return, prioritizing those with families, those with needed skills, those judged least likely to cause problems in occupied Germany. Weber receives his repatriation notice in October. He'll ship out in November, return to Hamburg, and then what? His sister's last letter described a city that no longer exists in any recognizable form. 90% of the city center destroyed. People living in basements and ruins. Food supplied by Allied occupation forces. No jobs, no infrastructure, no future that doesn't involve years of reconstruction. But others receive different news. Captain Miller announces a new program. German POWs can apply to remain in the United States temporarily to address labor shortages, with possible paths to permanent immigration. It's voluntary, requires vetting, and demands public renunciation of Nazi ideology. For many prisoners, it's an impossible choice. Johann applies immediately. His father died in the Ruhr bombings. A letter arrived in August with the news. His mother and sister survived, but live in conditions he can barely imagine. Still, he's 22 years old, with nothing to return to but rubble. He says here he can work there, send money home, and actually help them instead of just being another mouth to feed. The decision splits the camp. Some see staying as betrayal. Germany needs every able body for reconstruction. Others see it as pragmatic. Better to earn dollars in America and send them home than to starve in Bremen. The moral calculus is complicated by what they now know about the regime they'd served. Steiner surprises everyone by applying to stay. The hard-bitten captain who'd fought across 3 continents explains his reasoning one night. He says, "I'm 43 years old. I have skills, engineering, management, languages. In Germany, I'm a former Wehrmacht officer with a tainted past. Here, I'm a skilled worker who happens to be German. Where can I do more good?" The vetting process is thorough. American intelligence officers interview applicants, check backgrounds, assess sincerity. They reject anyone with SS connections, anyone who remains ideologically committed to Nazism, anyone who poses security risks. But for ordinary soldiers who have demonstrated genuine re-education, the door is open. Tom McKinney, the farmer Weber worked for, offers him a job. He says, "You're a good worker. War's over, I still need help. Pay is fair, and you can send money to your family." He pauses. "Your sister, right? In Hamburg? $1 goes a long way there now."
Weber struggles with the decision for weeks. Returning to Germany means confronting the ruins, living with collective guilt, scratching out survival in a destroyed nation. Staying means building a life in the country that defeated his homeland, sending dollars home while living in comfort that will seem obscene compared to German conditions. Father Dennis offers counsel, without judgment. There is no wrong choice here, Klaus, only different paths forward. Germany needs good men to rebuild, but good men can also help from abroad. In December, Weber makes his decision. He'll stay for 2 years, work, save money, and send it to Marguerite. Then, when Germany has stabilized, he'll return. It's a compromise that satisfies neither his guilt nor his loyalty, but it's practical. Marguerite needs food and shelter now, not his presence in a breadline. The day his repatriation is canceled and his work visa approved, Weber feels relief mixed with shame. That evening, he writes to his sister, trying to explain. The words come slowly. "I am staying in America temporarily. I will work and send money. I know this may seem like abandonment, but I can help you more from here than from Hamburg.
Forgive me. Johann receives approval as well, along with 70 other men from Camp Hearne. They're transferred to labor camps, less restrictive facilities, where they'll work in agriculture, construction, and industry while their immigration applications process. Some will eventually become American citizens. Others will work for years and return home with savings that seem like fortunes in post-war Germany. Krauss, predictably, refuses to apply. He'll return to Germany, to whatever remains of his life there. On his last night in the camp, he approaches Weber. "I don't understand your choice," he says stiffly, "but I don't judge it. Do what you must." It's as close to reconciliation as the rigid Oberfeldwebel can manage. The repatriation ships begin leaving in January 1946. Weber watches from the camp as trucks carry men to the trains, then to ports, then to ships sailing east. Some men weep with joy to be going home. Others weep with dread at what they'll find there. All carry complicated feelings about their 2 years in American captivity. March 1947, Houston, Texas. Weber stands on the construction site of a new office building, supervising a crew that includes 3 other former POWs. The work is honest, the pay is good, and every month he sends half his earnings to Marguerite. Her letters have changed in tone, still describing hardship, but now with hints of hope. The Marshall Plan has been announced. American aid is flowing into Germany. Reconstruction has begun in earnest. Johann works on a farm near Austin, engaged to the daughter of a German immigrant family who arrived before the war. He's applying for permanent residency. His letters to Weber describe a future he never imagined: American citizenship, a family, a life built from the ashes of defeat. Steiner found work with an engineering firm in Dallas, translating his military experience into civilian expertise. His first project? Designing factories. The irony isn't lost on him. "I spent years trying to destroy American production, and now I help build it." The men from Camp Hearne scattered across America, and a few thousand Germans remain, working, building, gradually becoming part of the nation that defeated them. It's a strange epilogue to a war that killed millions. Former enemies rebuilding relationships through labor and proximity. But what Weber remembers most, what haunts him still, is the revelation that came through captivity. Germany hadn't lost because of betrayal or bad luck or even superior Allied tactics. Germany lost because it challenged an industrial power so vast, so wealthy, so mechanically capable that the outcome was never in doubt. He thinks about the assembly lines that never stopped, the factories running 3 shifts, the casual abundance, even in prison camps. He remembers counting ships in New York Harbor, tractors on Texas farms, aircraft in newsreels. The mathematics had been visible from the beginning if anyone had cared to calculate honestly. The propaganda had told Germans they were supermen fighting inferior races. But standing in that New York harbor in May 1943, watching a nation untouched by war, operating at a scale that defied comprehension, Weber had understood the truth. Industrial capacity, not racial superiority, determined modern warfare. And America's capacity was effectively infinite compared to Germany's. On weekends, Weber sometimes drives through the Texas countryside in a used Ford he purchased, a luxury unimaginable to his former self. He passes oil derricks, refineries, chemical plants, manufacturing facilities. The industrial landscape that shocked him as a prisoner now feels familiar, even mundane. But he never loses appreciation for what it represents. He receives a letter from Marguerite in April. She's found work with the British occupation authorities, translating. The pay is modest but stable. She's moving out of the ruins into an actual apartment, damaged but repairable. Life continues, she writes. Slowly, painfully, but it continues. Your money helped us survive the worst. Now we can begin to live again. Weber reads the letter twice, then folds it carefully and places it in the box where he keeps all her correspondence. The guilt of survival, of comfort, of eating well while his family suffered, it has never entirely faded, but it has transformed into something more productive,
determination to build something meaningful from the catastrophe. That evening, he meets Johann and 2 other former POWs at a diner in Houston. They order hamburgers, coffee, pie, casual American abundance that still occasionally surprises them. They talk about their work, their plans, their families back home. They don't talk about the war often, but it's always present, a shadow that shaped everything they became. "Do you regret staying?" Johann asks suddenly. Weber considers the question. He thinks about the alternative, returning to Hamburg's ruins, competing for scarce jobs, living in basements. He thinks about the dollars he's sent home, the difference they've made. He thinks about the skills he's learning, the future he's building. "No," he says finally, "but I'll never forget why I stayed or what it cost to learn these lessons." The German POWs who passed through American camps, 425,000 men total, carried home a revelation that would shape post-war Europe. They'd seen what industrial democracy could achieve, how prosperity and freedom could coexist, how a nation could wage total war while maintaining civil liberties. Some rejected these lessons, clinging to old ideologies, but many accepted them, carrying seeds of democratic capitalism back to a Germany that would rise from ruins to become Europe's industrial heart. The shock of America's industrial might, witnessed firsthand by thousands of German prisoners, contributed to post-war Germany's embrace of democratic governance and free market economics. They'd seen the alternative, and it had produced mountains of corpses and mountains of rubble. Weber finishes his coffee and checks his watch. Tomorrow is another workday, another step forward, another chance to build something better from the wreckage of what was. The lesson learned in Camp Hearne, that prosperity comes from freedom, that industrial might requires educated populations, that democratic systems can wage war more effectively than tyrannies, these lessons would outlive the war itself. The sun sets over Houston, painting the sky in colors that remind Weber of those first shocking views of New York Harbor 4 years earlier. He's no longer a prisoner, but he'll never be entirely free of what he witnessed. The revelation of American power, the shame of German crimes, the complicated gratitude of survival, these will shape the rest of his life. But perhaps that's appropriate. Perhaps those who lived through catastrophe bear responsibility to remember, to testify, to ensure that the lessons purchased with such terrible cost